What began as a quiet shopping trip for Jimmy Butler's mother quickly turned into a powerful moment that would shake the basketball world and change lives forever. It was a sunny afternoon on Friday. Laverne Butler, mother of NBA star Jimmy Butler, stepped inside Vanderlux, Atlanta's most luxurious boutique. The interior was adorned with elegant decor, designer handbags, expensive perfumes, and an elite clientele. Laverne was dressed simply yet elegantly in a blouse. She wore no makeup, her hair neatly pulled back. She wasn't flashy, but her poise commanded attention. The reason for her visit was meaningful. Jimmy's birthday was just a few days away. Although he didn't want her to buy him anything, Laverne wanted to find a special gift for her son. After years of hardship, every small gesture felt like a quiet celebration of the success they had achieved. As her eyes scanned the shelves, she noticed a stylish leather watch box and a limited edition travel bag. Just then, she felt someone's gaze on her. Clarissa, the cashier, was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed, and her fake smile didn't reach Laverne. There was no warmth or helpfulness in her eyes, only suspicion. As Laverne picked up the bag to examine it, Clarissa stepped forward. "Ma'am, those items are quite expensive," she said, her voice polite but with an icy undertone. Laverne paused briefly. "I'm aware of that," she replied, calmly. "We just ask that you examine our products carefully." It wasn't what they said, but how they said it. They spoke in a condescending, dismissive tone. Laverne felt an old pain stir in her heart. It was a feeling she thought she had forgotten years ago. She gently placed the bag on the shelf and nodded politely. "Of course," she said. Then she quietly left the store. Neither Laverne nor Clarissa knew that what had just happened was being watched and recorded from a corner. Elena Reed, a young journalism intern sitting in a cafe across from the store, was taking street photos with her new phone. Her university assignment was to capture moments of humanity in public spaces. But at that moment, she captured something completely different: the silent humiliation of a mother. That night, Elena shared the short video on social media with the caption, "Still happening in 2025. Shameful." By morning, the video had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. By noon, the whole world knew who that woman was: Laverne Butler, the mother of NBA star Jimmy Butler. Meanwhile, 1,300 kilometers away in Miami, Jimmy Butler was practicing his shots before a charity event. He was joking around with the kids, dribbling the ball, and laughing. Then his manager came over and handed him his phone. "You have to see this," he said. As Jimmy watched the video, the smile faded from his face. Everything the camera had captured was there: Clarissa's eyes, her voice, her demeanor, and her mother's dignified yet subdued posture. There was no shouting or fighting, just a mother's silent dignity and the coldness of those facing her. He remained silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "That's my mother." His manager interrupted. "What do you want to do?" Jimmy didn't answer. He returned to the field. But something inside him had changed. This incident wouldn't just be a headline for him. This time, he wouldn't stay silent. That night, Laverne called her son. "Did you see it?" she asked in a soft voice. "Yes, I saw it," Jimmy replied. "I'm okay. This isn't the first time, you know." Jimmy's jaw tightened. "But it should have been the last." "Don't make a big deal out of it," his mother said, trying to calm him down. "No, Mom," Jimmy replied. "This time it would be disrespectful to keep quiet." Jimmy couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in bed, unable to get his mother's face out of his mind. The video played over and over again in his head. With each viewing, his heart tightened a little more, and his throat closed up. His mother, the woman who had carried his life on her shoulders, was now being looked down on in a store just because of her appearance. For Jimmy, it wasn't just about the fact that it was his mother who had experienced this. It was about justice. It was about respect. It was about human dignity. When morning came, his plans had changed. Instead of going to his team's practice, he called his manager. "We're going to Atlanta," he said in a firm voice. "For the store?" his manager asked. "No," Jimmy replied. "For my mother." A private plane was arranged. However, Jimmy took only 2 people with him, his childhood friend Marcus and Dana, his advisor from the charity organization. Both had worked with Jimmy for years and knew him inside out. When they arrived in Atlanta, their first stop was Laverne's house. When his mother opened the door, she smiled in surprise at the sight of her son. "Did you come to visit me? Or do you have a plan?" she asked. Jimmy looked into his mother's eyes. He was serious. "Both." Laverne invited him inside. Jimmy sat down on the couch and took a deep breath. "You've always been a strong woman, but being strong doesn't mean keeping quiet about everything," he said. "I don't want you to turn this into a social media case," said Laverne. "I don't want that either," replied Jimmy. "But I want this to be the end of it. Not just for you, for everyone." Laverne nodded silently. She knew the fire burning inside her son, and she no longer wanted to stop him. That night, Jimmy and Dana made a plan. The goal wasn't to embarrass anyone. The goal was to remind people what truly matters. The plan was simple, but powerful. The next morning, a crowd had gathered outside the Vanderlux store. Cameras, journalists, social media influencers. Jimmy walked toward the store wearing a plain black t-shirt and a hat. He was silent. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was determination. When he entered the store, the employees didn't recognize him at first. Then whispers began. "Is that Jimmy Butler?" Clarissa rolled her eyes. "He must be joking." Jimmy walked straight up to Clarissa. His voice wasn't loud, but his words were clear. "I'm Laverne Butler's son." Clarissa's face fell. "I watched what happened here yesterday," said Jimmy, "and I saw the disappointment in my mother's eyes." Clarissa wanted to say something, but Jimmy didn't let her. "What happened here is not your fault. It's ours. All of us, as a society. That's why I'm here. Not just to criticize you, to start a change." At that moment, a team entered the store. They were volunteers from Jimmy's charity. They had labels, brochures, and donation boxes in their hands. Jimmy walked to the center of the store and turned to the camera. "Every penny spent in this store today will go toward opportunities that will transform the lives of our mothers, fathers, and young people. When one person's pride is broken, all of our hearts are broken. But when one person is honored, we all rise." The store's customers began to applaud. Many couldn't hold back their tears. Clarissa stood frozen in place. Jimmy looked at her once more, then added quietly, "Sometimes not saying anything doesn't mean everything is normal, but I want to show what's wrong with normal now." When he stepped outside, Laverne was waiting at the door. She greeted her son and embraced him. "You're not just a good basketball player," his mother said. "You're a good man." Jimmy rested his head on his mother's shoulder. "You taught me. Always you." Laverne's words echoed in Jimmy's mind for a long time. For him, this moment was more meaningful than any victory he had ever achieved on the court. It wasn't just a tribute to his mother. It was a reflection of years of suppressed emotions, of the voices of millions who couldn't speak up. But there was still something missing in Jimmy's mind. He didn't want to reduce this story to a single event. So on the way home, he turned to Dana, who was sitting next to him. "We have to do something," he said. Dana took off her glasses and looked at him. "Like what?" Jimmy thought for a moment, then his eyes lit up. "A platform for people like my mom. A space where they can tell their stories, where they can go from invisibility to visibility." "A foundation?" Jimmy shook his head. "Not just a foundation, a movement." Within a few weeks, the plans took shape. They named their new initiative the Dignity Project, a digital platform where stories of discrimination, examples of solidarity, and silent heroes would be shared. The goal was not just to raise funds or provide aid. It was to tell stories, make them visible, and inspire others. The first episode, of course, featured his mother's story. But this time, the video wasn't just security camera footage. Laverne sat in her chair and told her story with her eyes. "When I was young, when I spoke up, they said I was angry. When I kept quiet, they said I was weak. But my son showed me that it's not the tone of your voice that matters. It's the power of your heart." The video received millions of views. It was shared hundreds of thousands of times on social media. People began sending in their own stories. Some had been belittled in stores. Some had been rejected for a job interview because of their appearance, and some had been ignored simply for keeping quiet. Every story strengthened something within Jimmy. This was no longer just a social responsibility project. It was a movement for change. During this process, Jimmy received numerous media invitations, talk shows, magazine covers, award ceremonies, but he declined most of them. Instead, he chose to do something simpler and more meaningful. He took his mother and began walking through the neighborhood. They visited small schools, local libraries, and nursing homes. And everywhere they went, he said the same thing. It's not my success that should inspire this country, but my mother's patience. One day, at an elementary school in Atlanta, a little boy raised his hand and asked Jimmy, "Is it better to be famous or to be a good person?" Jimmy smiled gently. He knelt down beside the child. "When you're a good person, you're already the most famous person. You just might not be on TV." The class applauded. Laverne wiped her eyes and thought to herself, "My son's greatest achievement is his conscience." But there was something Laverne didn't know. Jimmy was preparing a surprise for his mother. This time, it wouldn't be quiet. He would honor her strength in front of everyone. Jimmy had been working on it secretly for weeks. Neither Marcus nor Dana had been fully involved in the project, because this was between him and his mother. It wasn't a gesture of gratitude. It was a sign of admiration. It was the middle of the NBA season, and a special ceremony was planned for one of the home games in Miami. However, this ceremony had been announced in the press as the Social Values Award. Only a few people knew the real details. One of them was the team manager, and thanks to him, the plans had been carried out quietly. On game day, the arena was packed, the stands were full, cameras were ready, and fans were excited. But no one knew what the real moment would be. Jimmy went through his usual pre-game warm-up. As he headed back to the locker room, he grabbed his phone and sent his mother a message. "I want you to be in the stands today, Mom. Something special is going to happen." Laverne took her seat, unaware of what was happening. She was dressed simply, trying not to draw too much attention as usual, but her heart was racing for some reason. During the second intermission, the announcement system came on. "Please give a round of applause for tonight's recipient of the Dignity Honors Award." Laverne's eyes widened. Her name had been called. She was being asked to come on stage. As those around her applauded, she struggled to stand up. Without fully understanding what was happening, a staff member guided her toward the stage. Her eyes searched for Jimmy, and she saw him standing in the middle of the stage, holding a microphone. All the spotlights were now on Jimmy, but as he raised the microphone, he didn't take his eyes off his mother. "I've won many awards in my life, but the one truth I've never forgotten is this. Whoever I am in this life, I am because of her." The stands fell silent. "To my mother, Laverne Butler, not just for me, but for inspiring thousands of people with her patience, love, and strength. Today, I want to honor her on this stage." Then a short documentary about his mother's life was shown on the big screen. The difficulties she faced in her youth, the struggle of raising Jimmy on her own, working as a janitor at a school for years. Some people in the hall couldn't hold back their tears. Jimmy put down the microphone and walked over to his mother. He was holding a box. He handed the box to Laverne. Her hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was a small but elegant key. "This?" Jimmy nodded. "It's your new home, Mom. You'll never wake up tired in the morning again, and you'll never go to bed tired at night. This isn't just a house. It's a symbol of your hard work, your faith, and most importantly, your conscience." Laverne hugged her son. The microphones fell silent. The cameras were still rolling, but this moment belonged only to them. The fans had risen to their feet and cheered for minutes. Jimmy and his mother stood in the center. Confetti rained down from the sky, but their tears were far more real. That evening, news channels aired this moment repeatedly, but Jimmy didn't give any interviews. For him, this wasn't about publicity, it was about gratitude. He posted just one thing on his social media account. "I spoke up so that kindness wouldn't go unnoticed." This sentence quickly reached millions. The hashtag, "Let kindness not go unheard," turned into a trend on social media platforms. People began sharing stories about the silent heroes in their own lives. Some talked about their mothers, some about their grandfathers, some about their teachers, or neighbors who had been working the same job for years. Everyone had their own Laverne to share. Jimmy was no longer just an NBA star. He was an inspiration. The questions he received after each game were no longer about basketball statistics, but about social issues. He gladly embraced this new role because his mother had taught him not only about life, but also about what it means to be human. One day, during a discussion with young people under the Dignity Project umbrella, he was asked the following question: "Jimmy, what keeps you going despite achieving so much?" Jimmy took a deep breath. He answered as if speaking to the child within himself, not to the crowd. "When I was little, my mother told me, a person must be honest with themselves above all else. Everything I do today is because of the honesty my mother taught me. If even one person believes in themselves, a neighborhood changes. If a neighborhood changes, a city changes. And sometimes, a mother's quiet patience awakens the conscience of a nation." There was a long silence in the hall. Then one of the young people stood up and clapped. The others followed. The applause grew louder and louder, just like the movement Jimmy had started. Weeks later, Laverne sipped her first coffee in her new home and looked out the window. It was a simple neighborhood, quiet, but for the first time, she felt at peace. At that moment, she found an envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a small note from Jimmy. "Mom, your silence became my voice." Laverne closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew now, a mother's love could change not only a child's destiny, but also that of an entire community. And you, if you had the chance to do something that could give hope to even one person, would you do it? Send this story to a friend and ask them to share their thoughts. In the comments, write about the silent hero in your life. Subscribe, because the next story might warm your heart too.